السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
الحمد لله ثم الحمد لله. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونستنصره، ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهد الله فهو المهتد، ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، إلها واحدا أحدا صمدا، لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا، ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. وأشهد أن نبينا وعظيمنا محمدا عبد الله ورسوله وصفيه من خلقه وحبيبه. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين، وبعد. يقول جل جلاله في محكم التنزيل: الذين إن مكناهم في الأرض أقاموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة وأمروا بالمعروف ونهوا عن المنكر ولله عاقبة الأمور. I'm going to continue this week and talking about the topic or the article that I discussed with you last week, because there are a few points that I did not have enough time to get to. And obviously now the time is shorter and we have to finish the khutbah within a shorter period of time, which is good news for you, but it's not as good news for me to get the topic across as I need to. When we're talking about Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar, this is to me very important, because it's one of the pitfalls. In my opinion, it's one of the gaps in comprehension. Like, Muslims don't really fully understand, in my opinion, what this concept is and what it means in their deen. And it's mixed in with other stuff. that you could argue applies to it, but it's really, we're restricting the use of the term, and we're not really understanding why the Prophet ﷺ, for example, in this context that I'm sharing with you, why he specifically pointed it out. There has to be something to it, or else the Prophet ﷺ would not ask them for it. He wouldn't stand in front of the Ansar, putting a condition upon them that I'll only come to Yathrib if you will offer me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and number 3 was this: al-amru bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar, reforming social values. That you're going to understand that there are certain values that we have to emphasize, strengthen, help people understand why we do them, and there are other values that we have to push against or remove. Meaning the status quo will not be accepted. I'm not coming to you and I'm going to validate all of your values. There are a lot of values that I'm going to push against, but there are values that I'm going to strengthen, and I'm actually going to push forward for you, and I'm going to compliment you for. And this is one of the basic understanding, or the basic comprehensions that we have within usul al-fiqh. Urf, which is custom, is one of the sources of evidence within our deen. Now, the four major, or the four agreed upon sources of evidence, which is Quran, Sunnah, Ijma', Qiyas, consensus, and analogy. But then beyond that, there's other sources of evidence that scholars will use, especially when we don't have strong evidence in the main four. When we don't have anything to go back to, then we use other sources, and urf, which is custom, is one of them. And I want to define for you today the word ma'ruf. The word ma'ruf in Arabic means that which is known. Right? That is the definition of it in Arabic. Without just sticking to the linguistics, ma'ruf meaning something that is known. Munkar, something that is known to be negative. Something that is known to be negative. Ma'ruf is just something that is known. But then it was accepted amongst the Arab in their language that if you just use it that way, because they're an optimistic people living in the desert, you have to be. When you say ma'ruf, then it means that something that is known to be good. Something that is known to be good, to be beneficial. And then ma'ruf and munkar in that definition, with that definition, what they are is what are the norms of the society that you're a part of? You came to society, what are their norms? What are the values that they see to be positive? What are the values that they see to be negative? What of those values do you agree with? What of those values do you disagree with? The ones that you agree with, ta'mur biha. You continue to command, you emphasize, you strengthen, you reinforce with your behavior, with your practice, and with reminding people. And that's amr al-ma'ruf. And the values that you don't agree with, then you start pushing back against them. And that is nahi anil munkar. So when Muslims come to any given society, they're going to look for this set of value, the values that exist within that society. Because for us to imagine that any given society or any given country or population or community don't have a set of values is very arrogant of us. And that's not the truth. Any group of people have a set of values. They may know what they are, meaning they may vocalize them and have them written somewhere in the Constitution, or have them, or they explain them, or they're just understood, meaning it's something that you comprehend, understand, you pick up, you notice. When you spend enough time with them, you figure out what their values are. But every set of people, every group of people have a set of values. And as Muslims, we don't come to them. We don't come to people and ask them to erase everything that they have. And here's a new set of values. No, we come and look, what are the stuff that we agree with? And then we emphasize those and reinforce them. What do we disagree with and push back against? This is outside the world of theology, rituals, and ibadat, and acts of worship. It's not to say that that's not important. Of course it's important. What are we doing if that's not important? Of course, the whole point is to make sure that your ibadat are done appropriately. But that's called da'wah. That's called da'wah. And da'wah has its own, and the reason that we have this differentiation is so that once you mix them, one of them gets lost. Once you mix them fully, and you don't have the distinction between the two, one of them, if not both of them, get lost, and you don't know what you're doing anymore. There's a difference between me going to someone who's not Muslim and calling them to la ilaha illallah. There's a difference to going to that same person and asking them to park appropriately in a parking lot, and not to take a handicap spot, or not to park in a way where no one can park around them, or close someone's driveway. They're not the same thing. They're not the same thing. They won't be done in the same way either. And the people who will do A or B are different as well. Not everyone is qualified to go up to someone and talk to them about La ilaha illallah. I'm sorry. Not everyone is qualified to do that. And not everyone has the right to do that. And not everyone has the ability to do that. You have to be a little bit more prepared. You have to be prepped. You have to be educated. And you have to know you have to have a relationship. You have to be in the right situation. The circumstances have to be correct for you to perform da'wah. And then there's an etiquette to it. There's a finesse. There's an art to performing da'wah. There's an art to how you bring people closer to Allah. The goal is loving Rabbna subhanahu wa ta'ala. To love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the end goal. They love Allah. How do they love Allah? Well, then that's the question. Answer that. How are you going to make that person love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Do you know how to do that? Well, I don't know how to do that. Then maybe you should be a facilitator, a mediator. Maybe you bring someone who can help with that and help this person. Maybe you shouldn't be the person actually speaking. You can still have a role in da'wah, but it won't necessarily be the role of talking to others. Everyone has their own da'wah, but there's a finesse to it. Because the goal is to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That requires a certain approach. You have to understand the art of how to do this. As he did, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Amr al-Ma'ruf and Nahy al-Munkar does not require art. There's no finesse to it. Doesn't require preparation. Here are the values. We agree with them, so we will continue to reinforce them, and we will scorn, and we will point out those who don't, and they will be held accountable. And the values in the community that we don't agree with, we will continue to push back against. We will vocally do it on manabir, and we will do it outside, and we will do it within advocacy lanes and avenues. We'll do it politically, we'll use the media, we'll push against the values that we don't agree with. And it doesn't require much. You don't have to be fully educated. It's a set of values, either you agree with them or you don't. So it's not the same thing. They're both 100% required in our deen to the core. I am not here to say that one is not important. No, both of them are extremely important. And actually, the da'wah piece is going to be talked about in the 4th article. So just give me a minute. But this is different. This is about values. That's why when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِن مَكَّنَّاهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ, and the people whom, if we give them strength and a steady hold on the ground, and they have authority and they have the ability to make decisions, أَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَوُا الزَّكَاةَ, they will perform their rituals. وَأَمَرُوا بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَنَهُوا عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ, and they preserve and they reform their values. They fix the values. Both of them have to happen. When Luqman spoke to his son, يَا بُنَيَّ أَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ, right? وَأْمُرْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَانْهَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ وَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا أَصَابَكَ. He gave him the advice. You have to participate. Everyone's responsible for Amr al-Ma'ruf and Nahy al-Munkar. Everyone is. Not everyone can be a sheikh and tell people what to do and change their deen. Not everyone should be giving religious advice. Actually, if people would stop doing that, that would be amazing. If people will just maybe lessen the religious advice that they offer, that they don't know what they're talking about. Maybe not everything you hear from a sheikh, you need to immediately go tell someone else because they're not doing the same thing because you don't know all of the details here. Maybe you don't understand that this thing that your sheikh said is one opinion amongst many that are acceptable, and the person who's doing this is also acceptable because you're not properly educated. Maybe just keep that to yourself. But Amr al-Ma'ruf and Nahy al-Munkar is easy. It's not easy, but that's clear. That's clear because that's about our values. The values of respect. The values of empathy, of equality, the values of kindness, the values of standing in line and parking our cars appropriately, and being just a little bit decent when we're trying to get in and out, for example, of a place, and just the basics of human decency. This is what al-Ma'ruf Nahy al-Munkar are. Basics of human decency. You're laughing because you're like, that's not gonna. It's gone, isn't it gone? It's gone in one of the aspects of life today. In one of the aspects of life, there's a part of our life today where it's gone, where I can't use certain terminology, and if I use it and someone hears, then I have to go, then I'll be fired from my job because I can't say, because the pronouns matter, and I don't even know how to define male and female anymore. I don't even know what's acceptable and what's not, and who's allowed to get married. I can't say anything anymore because the basics that are clear are not clear anymore. When you leave something, when you leave Amr al-Ma'ruf and Nahy al-Munkar, when you stop fighting for your values, when you stop pushing and pointing things out, you lose them. You lose them. And that's what will happen to us. So the basics of what is considered to be decent and good can be lost if we don't fight for it. If we don't point out, no, you're not allowed to speak like that to people. You're not allowed to speak like that to people. You can't raise your voice like that in front of someone. You're not allowed to treat a child that way, or treat your wife that way, or treat a friend, or treat a client, or treat a human being like that. You're not allowed to do that. This is a value. This is not da'wah. It doesn't require a sheikh to do it. Everyone should be involved in that. It doesn't have to be aggressive. Don't get me wrong. Don't let the tone of my voice fool you to think that I'm asking you to become aggressive on this topic. No, I'm not asking you to be rude about it. Actually, one of the values that we have is etiquette, is adab. One of the values that we have is when you speak to people, you speak to them بالحسنى بالموعظة الحسنة جادلهم بالتي هي أحسن. You speak to them in the best way possible. It's actually the opposite that seems to cause all the problems. It's actually what we're known for, unfortunately, as a population, as Muslims and Arab, specifically, and I'm saying because I'm Arab, I can say it, I won't use any other racial background to protect all of you. We're very rough, we're very loud. We don't respect other people's space. We don't care. We're not considerate. We're not looking to make sure that everyone else is taken care of. We don't care. We came up with this mentality. Me, it's me, and then let the flood take everyone. I don't care as long as I get through. This is not Islamic. This is not a value that we carry. Where did this value come from? Is it a good one? Is it worth amr al-ma'ruf? Is it a ma'ruf that we command? Or is it a munkar that we push back against? No, that's not okay. And our children should not grow up like that. Children should not grow up thinking that they can bully other people, or they can be rude, or they can respond in a disrespectful way to people who are older than them. These are values. And then there's da'wah. Is there overlap? 100% there's overlap. There's always going to be overlap. But the Prophet ﷺ made a distinction for the people in front of him, and the Quran did too. That please be aware that there are two things here that are at play. You should be commanding all that is good, religious or value-based. You should be discouraging all that is bad, religious and value-based. But make sure you understand that there's a little bit of a difference between the two. Because values are agreed upon by humanity. They don't have to be Muslim. Someone doesn't have to be Muslim to agree that we all are equal and should be treated equally. And we all deserve the same rights and we all should be respected. You don't need a religion for that. We do as a collective human race. But the person in front of you does not have to be Muslim to respond to that. That's why it's not necessarily da'wah. This is an issue of keeping the values up. When we lose values, when we lose our values, when we no longer know what our principles are and what we stand for and who we are, then we lose everything. And the Prophet ﷺ knew that the Arab had lost values. They had some values. They were generous people. They were people of their word, for example. But they lost other values. They were extremely racist. Very racist. I know what you're thinking about. Maybe you have some older relatives or you sat in gatherings of people you know and they said things like, oh, thankfully no one's recording this one. But they were worse back then, way worse. There was racism. They buried little girls when they were born. Right? They had a completely distorted understanding of women altogether. Their wealth, how they dealt with their wealth, usury. They had values that were bad. The Prophet ﷺ had to come and say, we're going to change these things. These values are done with. They're done with. The Arab didn't like that. They didn't like that. One of the values was the equality of people's weight in governance. Everyone had a right to speak. The Arab, the way they ran the way they governed themselves, you had the Sheikh al-Qabila, that's it. You had the head. Everyone else just sat there, kissed his feet, sucked up to him, so that hopefully when he leaves, someone else would take his spot. But there was no democracy. No one's mattered. No one's opinion mattered. Then he came, alayhi salatu wasalam, he changed things. And he started asking, what do we do? Ashiru alayya ayyuhan nas. Everyone's like, what? Aren't you Rasulullah? Out of all of the shuyukh al-qaba'il, if anyone has the right to just say what to do next, it's you. Because Jibreel speaks to you. You can just ask him. And then Allah tells him, and then we're good. But the other guy has no wahi, and he's still doing it. Out of any... If we were going to change this, we wouldn't change it with you, change it with everyone else. But he changed with himself, alayhi salatu wasalam. The Quran told him, وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. You're going to ask them. So he would ask, alayhi salatu wasalam. And people were like, why are you doing this? Where did you get this from? It was a change of value. It was pushing back on certain values. And as Muslims, we have to identify what values exist in this country that we like, that are Islamic, that are part of who we are. And then we strengthen them. And we are the first to practice them. And we're the first to reinforce them in our behaviors and in our teachings and in our preaching. And what values do we not agree with? And we push back against vocally and appropriately and with correct arguments. And we make it very clear what our actual values are. This is very complicated. I have to level with you. It's a complicated thing, but no one's doing it. It's not happening. Very small silos of Muslims in the world in the world are actually thinking about this. And I think one of the reasons is because we don't understand what it means. This is what he pointed out to them, alayhi salatu wasalam. Amr al-Ma'ruf and Nahy al-Munkar. They understood when they heard Amr al-Ma'ruf and Nahy al-Munkar, they understood Ansar. Okay, that means there are a couple of stuff that are going to change for us. And he came and changed a bunch of things. This whole racism, this whole fight between Aus and Khazraj, he killed off. And anyone who supported it, he removed, alayhi salatu wasalam. That person lost their status. They lost their respect if that person was still pushing that there's a difference between the two tribes and one tribe is good and the other tribe is bad. He removed them completely. Those who continued usury were removed. Those who continued alcohol were removed. He removed. If you weren't really willing to stand, help him change the values, he removed you. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. You lost your status. And it's something that's important because as Muslims here, our values are threatened. Our basic values are threatened. And we have to acknowledge that. And when we acknowledge that, then we have to figure out how do we deal with this? How do we change the reality that we're in? أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه يغفر لكم يا فوز المستغفرين استغفر الله. الحمد لله وحده وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على من لا نبي بعده وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اتبع نهجه ووفى عهده. إخواني أخواتي باختصار تحدثت عن هذه المسألة الأسبوع الماضي وأردت أن أعيد الحديث عنها مرة أخرى وأن أفصل في قضية تعريف المعروف وتعريف المنكر. ما معنى هاتين الكلمتين وما كان مفهوم العربي في ذلك الزمان إذا ما استخدم النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم هذه الألفاظ؟ إذا ما قال الأمر بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر، ما الذي كان يتبادر إلى أذهان العرب؟ ما الذي كانوا يفكرون فيه؟ هل كانوا يفكرون بإنسان يدعو الآخر ليصلي أو ليصوم أو ليزكي؟ لا، هذه دعوة وهذه مطلوبة وهذه مهمة ولا ينكرها عاقل ولا ينكرها إلا كافر أصلا. ونحن كمسلمين نقوم بهذا الأمر ليلا ونهارا وهي من أسباب وجود المنابر أصلا. لكن فهمهم لمعنى الأمر بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر كان فيما يتعلق بقيمهم بأخلاقهم، أن القيم والأخلاق تحتاج إلى حصون تحميها، فإن لم تكن هناك حصون فهذه القيم هذه الأخلاق معرضة للانهيار، معرضة للهدم من خارجها أو من داخلها. والذي يبقي القيمة والذي يبقي الخلق في مكانه هو أمر الناس به ونهي الناس عن ضده، وبضدها تتميز الأشياء. فالنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان مما يطالب به العرب يطالب به المسلمين والأنصار خصوصا أن يقوموا بهذه المسألة، أن هناك قيم، بعض قيمكم جميلة لطيفة كالشجاعة وكالجود والكرم وكالأمانة. هناك قيم عند العرب جميلة كانت والحشمة وغيرها. ثم هناك قيم أخرى كانت سيئة، كان هناك ظلم، هناك سفك للدم، هناك عنصرية، كان هناك. فالنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لم يأتي إلى المدينة إلى الأنصار ليقر كل قيمهم، لا، بل أتى يقر بعض القيم عندهم وينهى عن قيم أخرى ويوجد قيما أخرى. وهذه مسألة صعبة تشق على النفس، أن أغير من قيمة عندي وخلق وتغير أنت، هذه قضية صعبة. من شب على شيء شاب عليه، ومن أسس في نفسه قيمة فيصعب عليه أن يغيرها. ولذلك الناس معادن، خيارهم في الجاهلية خيارهم في الإسلام إذا فقهوا. فالذي قيمه طيبة قبل الإسلام يسهل عليه أن يسلم، سهل عليه يسلم، لأن الإسلام فقط يضيف على قيمه الطيبة، يضيف عليه التوحيد ويضيف عليه طاعة الله وتقواه، فالأمر بسيط. أما من فسدت قيمه وساءت أخلاقه فهذا يحتاج إلى أن يسلم ثم يغير من نفسه ويغير من طباعه ومن شيمه ومن عاداته ومن تربيته المنزلية ومن تربيته الروحية ومن تربيته وأخلاقه الاجتماعية. هذا صعب، هذا يشق على الناس. فكان يدرك ما يقول عليه الصلاة والسلام إذ أمرهم، وكانوا يدركون ما يطلب منهم فقبلوا، قالوا نعم. فأتى فأزال الربا وأزال الخمر وأزال العنصرية وأزال أمور كثيرة عليه الصلاة والسلام شقت عليهم في بادئ الأمر. ما تقرؤون سورة الأنفال؟ ما عجبهم يسألونك عن الأنفال، قل الأنفال لله والرسول فاتقوا الله وأصلحوا ذات بينكم وأطيعوا الله ورسوله إن كنتم مؤمنين. The example of the Anfal in the Quran is a strong one. I talked about this months ago. When one of the changes was that the wealth that we bring in as a country is not going just to the people who were participated, is going to go to the people who are poor. We're going to strengthen the lower middle class, or the class who are in poverty. They deserve that. There's a certain amount of our wealth that has to go to them. This was a change of value. Aside from zakah is a ritual that has obviously a value behind it, but this is just a change of value in general. That the money that you make is not just yours. There is a haqq, there's a right in it for others that are not as fortunate. They didn't like that. And then they said things they shouldn't have said. And the Surah Al-Anfal was revealed saying, you don't do that again. Don't fight over dunya. It's aib. Don't do that again. And the Sahaba said, Ubadah ibn Samit said, لما أتت الأنفال ساءت فيها أخلاقنا. Like they actually admitted it, and they said, yeah, when that happened after Badr, we didn't behave the way we should have. We all kind of said something we should have, and the Quran came and said, nope, this is how it's going to be. So it's change. This is hard. He says, alayhi salatu wasalam, in the hadith narrated by Imam Tirmidhi, قال, listen to this, and this is a authentic chain narration. قال لتأمرن بالمعروف ولا تنهون عن المنكر أو ليوشكن الله أن يبعث عليكم عذابا من عنده ثم تدعونه فلا يستجاب لكم. Said, I swear, you will command ma'ruf and you will discourage and command against munkar. You will do this, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will very soon send upon you a adhab, a punishment of some sort. Yeah? And then you will stand and say, Ya Allah, and He won't listen to you. This is what he's warning us, alayhi salatu wasalam, from. You understand the problem? Because once values go rotten, what's the point? So you're praying in the first saf, and I'm wearing white, and the taqiyya's white, and the lihya's white, but the heart's black. What's the point? But the heart is, what's the point? What's the point? There's no point. He's not listening, subhanahu wa ta'ala. The man, the known hadith, the man who he came to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's dressed humbly, he's covered with dust, and he's saying, Ya Rab, and the man, the Prophet alayhi salatu wa وَمَطْعَمُهُ حَرَامٌ وَمَشْرَبُهُ حَرَامٌ وَغُذِّيَ بِالْحَرَامِ, and this person eats haram, drinks haram, he was raised with haram. فَأَنَّا يُسْتَجَابُ لَهُ. Who is going to listen to Allah? How is Allah going to listen to him? It's values that dictate these things. It's values that dictate whether you touch haram or not. When you're hungry, when you're in need, whether you will go and take something that's not yours, when you're in a moment where you feel that pinch, that financial pinch and fear for your children, do you take haram and say, no, that's the value, that's ma'ruf and munkar. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq once got on the minbar, as I am here, and he said, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu alaykum anfusakum la yadurrukum man dhalla idha ihtadaytum. He recited the verse in Surah Al-Ma'idah, that all those who believe, you are responsible for yourselves. You are not harmed by those who go astray if you find guidance. فَقَالَ أَلَا إِنَّكُمْ تَقْرَؤُونَهَا وَتُسِيئُونَ فَهْمَهَا. Indeed, you recite it and you don't understand what it means. فَإِنِّي سَمِعْتُ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَآلِهِ وَسَلَّمَ يَقُولُ حديث الترمذي. And I heard the Prophet say, لَتَأْمُرُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَلَتَنْهَوُنَّ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ أَوْ لَيُوشِكَنَّ اللَّهُ أَنْ يَعُمَّكُمْ بِعِقَابٍ. You will command ma'ruf and you will discourage munkar, or Allah will send upon you a iqab, a punishment for all of you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect all of us. This is why I'm talking about this topic, because we're at a time, we're in this position, in a state where our values are they're being questioned. The basic values are being questioned. And we, unfortunately, are not upholding our values appropriately. We're not upholding our values. I see it because I work with people. I see it. I see the amount of crimes and domestic abuse, and corners being cut, and lack of trustworthiness in transactions, and respect of basic order within the country and law. I see it. We're the ones who are we're not doing well. We're not upholding our own values. The values that the Prophet ﷺ taught us, we're not upholding these values. How do we expect Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us success and grant us victory and grant us this and grant us that, and we keep on asking Him for things, but we can't just seem to uphold basic human decency amongst ourselves. We can't respect one another. We have no empathy towards each other. We're not doing what we should be doing. We're not taking care of it. We're not. I'm sorry. I hope the day comes where I can stand here and I can tell you the opposite and actually believe it. And I can tell you that no, everything is fine. And I can lie to you and to myself and try to convince myself of something different, but it's not the truth. It's not the truth, yeah. Can it change? It can change. It will change. Bi-idhnillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala, it will change. And with the efforts of people who care about this, it will change. It changed before. Many times it'll change again. But we cannot actually walk around acting like it's good and it's going well when it isn't. We can't. And this is a main problem for us, for my child and your child to grow up questioning their basic values and not feeling proud of them and not feeling that not feeling the right amount of adherence towards these values and the authenticity of these values and the originality of these values that we carry, because we're not doing our job and commanding them and pushing against the other and refusing those amongst us who don't do that. And that's what I wanted to share with you. I'll end with that, inshallah ta'ala. I hope that was a benefit to you. واعلموا أن الله أمرنا بأمر عظيم فقال إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد وارض اللهم عن الأربعة الخلفاء السادة الحنفاء أبي بكر وعمر وعثمان وعلي وارض اللهم عن أزواجه أمهات المؤمنين وعن آله الطيبين الطاهرين وعن صحابته الغر الميامين وعن التابعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وعنا معهم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات اللهم فرج هموم المهمومين ونفس كروب المكروبين وارفع الغم عن المغمومين وارفع الظلم عن المظلومين واحقن دماءنا ودماء المسلمين اللهم احقن دماء إخواننا المستضعفين في كل مكان اللهم احقن دماءهم في فلسطين وفي لبنان وفي السودان وفي ميانمار وفي غيرها من بلاد الأرض يا رب العالمين اللهم ردنا أجمعين إليك وإلى دينك ردا جميلا اللهم رد المسجد الأقصى إلى رحاب المسلمين أخرج الصهاينة منه أذلة صاغرين وارزقنا أجمعين فيه صلاة قبل الممات يا رب العالمين اللهم تب علينا من جميع ذنوبنا توبة نصوحا طهرنا بها قلبا وجسدا وروحا وما ذلك عليك اللهم بعزيز ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. Inshallah, after Jummah we'll wait for a few minutes and pray, make adhan for Asr, and then we'll pray Sunnah before Asr and then pray Asr. So if you want to stick around just for Salat al-Asr, just so you get both, and that's there's barakah in that. All of the weekend halaqat start at 6:45. So Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If you attend them usually, then they start 6:45, and Isha in this masjid is 7:45 until March. It'll stay until March, and when it starts to get later, but it'll continue to be 7:45. Even if Isha, I know Isha is going to be 6:10 and 6:05. I know. You don't have to come and tell me that. I know when Isha adhan is. And Iqamah is going to be 7:45 to make it easy for people who work, have jobs to get home, have some food, and then come